The morning sun cast long shadows across Millbrook Elementary's parking lot as two yellow school buses idled, their engines humming with anticipation. Children pressed their faces against windows, breath fogging the glass as they peered out at the sprawling nature preserve that would be their destination for the day. Among them, 8-year-old twins Sarah and Emma Chin sat side by side in the third row, their matching purple backpacks clutched tightly in their small hands. Sarah, the older twin by 12 minutes, had her mother's serious dark eyes and methodical nature. She'd packed her bag the night before with military precision: water bottle, granola bars, field notebook, and 3 perfectly sharpened pencils. Emma, meanwhile, had thrown her supplies together that morning, her bag a chaotic mix of snacks, a disposable camera, and a small stuffed rabbit she'd smuggled along despite being told toys weren't allowed on field trips. "Remember, stay with your buddy," called out Mrs. Peterson, their third-grade teacher, as she climbed aboard the lead bus. At 26, she was in her second year of teaching, still full of enthusiasm for outdoor education and hands-on learning. The Nature Preserve field trip was her idea, a chance for the children to see the ecosystem they'd been studying come alive beyond textbook pages. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The Chin twins had been assigned as each other's buddies, which suited them perfectly. Despite their different personalities, they were inseparable, sharing that mysterious twin connection their parents often marveled at. Their mother, Dr. Linda Chin, had kissed them goodbye that morning with her usual mixture of pride and worry, reminding them to listen to their teacher and stay together. Their father, David, had ruffled their hair and promised to hear all about their adventure when they returned. The bus ride to Whispering Pines Nature Preserve took 45 minutes, winding through increasingly dense forest until they reached the visitor center. The preserve sprawled across 800 acres of mixed woodland, complete with hiking trails, a small lake, and numerous educational stations designed for school groups. Mrs. Peterson had visited twice to plan the route, ensuring the trails were appropriate for 8- and 9-year-olds. As the children disembarked, Park Ranger Jake Morrison gathered them around the visitor center's wooden deck. A weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner with children, Morrison had been leading school groups through these woods for over a decade. He understood how to capture young imaginations while keeping safety paramount. "Welcome to Whispering Pines," Morrison announced, his voice carrying easily over the excited chatter. "Today you're going to be nature detectives. We'll explore 3 different habitats, learn about the animals that live here, and discover how everything in nature is connected." The group was divided into 3 smaller teams of 8 children each, with Mrs. Peterson leading one group, Morrison another, and parent volunteer Carol Williams taking the third. Sarah and Emma found themselves in Mrs. Peterson's group, along with their classmates Michael, Jessica, Tommy, Lisa, Brandon, and quiet Stephanie, who rarely spoke above a whisper. The morning progressed beautifully. Mrs. Peterson's group followed the maple trail, stopping frequently to examine interesting plants, collect leaves for their nature journals, and observe wildlife. The twins worked together perfectly, Sarah carefully documenting their findings while Emma captured moments with her camera. They spotted a red-tailed hawk circling overhead, found a family of chipmunks gathering acorns, and discovered a small creek where water striders danced across the surface. "Look, Emma," Sarah whispered, pointing to a cluster of mushrooms growing at the base of an ancient oak. "Those are the ones Mr. Morrison talked about. The ones that help trees communicate." Emma crouched down, adjusting her camera angle. "They look like tiny umbrellas. Do you think the fairies use them when it rains?" Mrs. Peterson smiled at their wonder, checking her watch. 11:30. They were making good time, with lunch scheduled for noon at the picnic area near the lake. The other groups were exploring different sections of the preserve, all planned to converge at the designated meeting spot. As they continued along the trail, the path forked unexpectedly. Mrs. Peterson paused, consulting her map. She'd walked this route during her planning visits, but the fork didn't look familiar. The main trail curved left toward the lake, while a narrower path branched right, disappearing into denser woodland. "This way, everyone," she decided, leading them left toward their intended destination. The children followed in their buddy pairs, chattering about their discoveries. It was Tommy who first noticed. "Hey, where are Sarah and Emma?" Mrs. Peterson turned, quickly counting heads. 6 children. Her heart began to race as she recounted. Michael and Jessica, Tommy and Lisa, Brandon and Stephanie. No twins. "Sarah, Emma," she called, her voice echoing through the trees. The remaining children fell silent, sensing their teacher's sudden panic. "When did you last see them?" Mrs. Peterson asked, trying to keep her voice calm while her mind raced through the last few minutes. "They were right behind us at the mushroom tree," Jessica offered. Emma was taking pictures. Mrs. Peterson's hands shook as she pulled out her whistle, blowing 3 sharp blasts, the emergency signal. In the distance, she heard answering whistles from the other groups. Within minutes, Morrison and Carol Williams appeared with their children, faces tense with concern. "2 of my students are missing," Mrs. Peterson explained, her professional composure barely containing her growing terror. "The Chin twins. They were with us 10 minutes ago." Morrison immediately took charge, his years of experience kicking in. He radioed the park office, initiating emergency protocols while organizing the adults to backtrack along the trail. The children were gathered in a tight group, their earlier excitement replaced by confused worry. "Sarah, Emma." Their voices rang through the forest as they retraced their steps. They found the ancient oak with its mushroom cluster, but no sign of the girls. Morrison examined the ground carefully, looking for any indication of which direction they might have gone. The fork in the trail loomed ahead, and Morrison's expression grew grim. "This path," he said, indicating the right branch, "it's not on the official trail map. It's an old maintenance road we closed off years ago. The markers must have fallen down." The implications hit Mrs. Peterson like a physical blow. While she led the group left, the twins had somehow taken the unmarked path to the right. They could be anywhere in hundreds of acres of wilderness, 2 8-year-old girls with no survival training and no way to signal for help. Within an hour, Whispering Pines Nature Preserve became the center of a massive search operation. Local police arrived first, followed by county sheriff's deputies, state police, and volunteer search and rescue teams. David and Linda Chin raced from their respective workplaces, arriving to find their worst nightmare unfolding in organized chaos. Linda Chin, a pediatrician accustomed to handling crises, found herself completely helpless as she watched strangers organize the search for her daughters. David, an engineer who solved problems for a living, paced frantically as searchers spread out through the woods with dogs, helicopters circled overhead, and the media began arriving with their cameras and questions. "They're smart girls," Linda kept repeating, as much to convince herself as anyone else. "Sarah always follows rules, and Emma's resourceful. They'll stay together. They know to stay together." The first day of searching yielded nothing. No clothing, no backpacks, no sign that the twins had ever walked the old maintenance road. As darkness fell, the active search was suspended, though volunteers continued to patrol the perimeter roads in case the girls had somehow made it out of the woods. That night, the Chin family didn't sleep. Relatives arrived to provide support, neighbors brought food that went uneaten, and the phone rang constantly with offers of help and questions from reporters. Linda sat by the window, staring out at the darkness, imagining her daughters cold and frightened somewhere in that vast wilderness. The search resumed at dawn, expanded now to include neighboring counties and specialized teams with thermal imaging equipment. The story had captured regional attention, twin girls missing in nature preserve. Local television stations provided updates every hour, showing the girls' school photos and pleading for any information. Mrs. Peterson, devastated by guilt, had been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. She spent her days at the search command post, helping coordinate efforts and providing any detail that might be relevant. The image of Sarah and Emma walking trustingly behind her would haunt her dreams for years to come. Days became weeks. The intensive search gradually scaled back as hope dimmed and resources were redirected. The official investigation expanded beyond a simple case of lost children. Detectives interviewed every adult who'd been at the preserve that day, examined the possibility of abduction, and followed up on dozens of reported sightings that led nowhere. The Chin family's life became a strange limbo of waiting and hoping. David took leave from work to coordinate with investigators and search teams. Linda continued seeing patients, finding that focusing on other children's needs provided brief respites from her own anguish. But every night, they returned to a house that felt impossibly empty, to bedrooms that remained exactly as their daughters had left them. Months passed. The case remained open, but active investigation dwindled. The Chin family hired private investigators, organized their own search parties, and maintained a reward fund that grew through community donations. Missing person flyers with the twins' faces appeared on telephone poles and in store windows throughout the region. The first anniversary came and went with renewed media attention and expanded searches, but no new leads. Linda and David Chin aged visibly, their marriage strained by grief and the constant pressure of not knowing. They attended support groups for families of missing children, learning to navigate a world where hope and despair existed in constant tension. Mrs. Peterson eventually returned to teaching at a different school, but the guilt never left her. She became an advocate for improved field trip safety protocols, turning her tragedy into a mission to prevent similar losses. Yet every September, when new third graders filled her classroom, she saw Sarah and Emma's faces among them. Years accumulated like sediment, each one adding weight to the mystery. The twins would have started middle school, then high school. Their classmates graduated and moved on with their lives, but Sarah and Emma remained frozen in time as 8-year-old girls in purple backpacks. The Chin family never moved from their house, maintaining it as a beacon for their daughter's return. Linda kept their room exactly as it had been, down to the unmade beds and scattered toys. David installed new locks and security systems, as if better protection could somehow undo what had already happened. The case file grew thick with reports, interviews, and false leads. Detective Ray Martinez, who'd been assigned to the case from the beginning, never stopped working it entirely. Even as other cases demanded his attention, he'd return to the Chin file regularly, reviewing evidence and following up on new tips. The twins' disappearance had become personal for him, a reminder of how quickly innocent lives could vanish without explanation. Local folklore began to grow around the case. Some claimed the preserve was cursed, that children who wandered off the marked trails were taken by something otherworldly. Others whispered about a hermit living deep in the woods, or a network of caves where someone could hide indefinitely. These stories provided no comfort to the Chin family, only additional pain as their daughter's disappearance became the stuff of local legend. The preserve itself changed in response to the tragedy. New safety measures were implemented: better trail marking, mandatory GPS devices for all school groups, and stricter supervision ratios. The old maintenance road where the twins had presumably vanished was permanently blocked and posted with warning signs. As the 10th anniversary approached, the case received renewed attention. A documentary crew interviewed the family, investigators, and search team members, trying to piece together what might have happened on that October morning. The program aired nationally, generating hundreds of new tips that investigators dutifully followed up on, though none led to answers. Linda Chin had become a different person over the decade. The vibrant pediatrician had transformed into a quiet advocate for missing children, channeling her grief into helping other families navigate similar tragedies. David threw himself into work, designing safety systems with an intensity that colleagues found both admirable and concerning. The twins' bedroom became a shrine, carefully maintained but never disturbed. Birthday presents accumulated on their dresser, gifts for children who would never age beyond 8 years old. Linda would sometimes sit in the room for hours, talking to her daughters as if they might suddenly materialize and ask what was for dinner. Mrs. Peterson, now teaching 5th grade at Lincoln Elementary across town, had developed her own rituals of remembrance. Every October 12th, the anniversary of the field trip, she would drive to Whispering Pines and walk the Maple Trail alone, carrying flowers to leave at the spot where she'd last seen the twins. The preserve had become a pilgrimage site of sorts for the community. Families would visit to remember Sarah and Emma, leaving small tokens and flowers at a memorial plaque installed near the visitor center. The plaque bore their school photos and a simple inscription: Sarah and Emma Chin, forever in our hearts, October 12, 1989. Detective Martinez, now nearing retirement, had worked hundreds of cases over his career, but none haunted him like the Chin twins. He'd followed leads across multiple states, investigated possible connections to other missing children cases, and consulted with FBI behavioral analysts. The complete absence of evidence remained the most puzzling aspect. 2 children don't simply vanish without leaving some trace, yet that's exactly what had happened. The case had affected everyone involved in ways both subtle and profound. Search and rescue volunteers spoke of it as the one that got away, the case that reminded them of their limitations. Park rangers throughout the state implemented new protocols, understanding how quickly a routine school trip could become a nightmare. As the 15th anniversary passed, even the most optimistic supporters began to accept that Sarah and Emma Chin were likely never coming home. The reward fund was quietly converted into a scholarship program for elementary education majors, ensuring that their memory would live on in future teachers who might prevent similar tragedies. Linda and David's marriage had survived, strengthened by shared grief and mutual support, but they were different people than they'd been before. They spoke in the measured tones of those who've learned that life can change irrevocably in an instant. Their love for their daughters remained fierce and unwavering, but hope had evolved into a quieter form of waiting. The preserve continued its educational mission, hosting thousands of school children each year. New generations of teachers brought their classes to learn about ecosystems and conservation, most unaware of the tragedy that had shaped the safety protocols they followed. The old maintenance road remained blocked, slowly being reclaimed by the forest. Mrs. Peterson, now in her 40s, had become a master teacher, known for her meticulous planning and unwavering focus on student safety. She never spoke publicly about the Chin twins, but colleagues noticed how she counted heads obsessively during field trips, how she insisted on backup communication devices, and how she never let children out of her sight. The documentary about the case had sparked renewed interest, leading to several books and articles examining the mystery. True crime enthusiasts debated theories online, analyzing every detail of that October morning. Some focused on the possibility of abduction, others on the theory that the girls had become lost and succumbed to the elements. A few suggested more exotic explanations involving underground cave systems or human trafficking networks. None of these theories provided comfort to the Chin family. Linda had stopped reading about the case years earlier, finding that speculation about her daughter's fate only intensified her pain. David occasionally reviewed new information, hoping that some fresh perspective might yield answers, but he learned to temper his expectations. The twins' classmates had grown up, graduated from high school, and moved on to college and careers. Some had children of their own now, and they would sometimes tell their kids about their missing classmates, keeping Sarah and Emma's memory alive in a new generation. The story had become part of the community's collective memory, a reminder of innocence lost and the fragility of safety. As 2007 approached, marking 18 years since the disappearance, most people had accepted that the mystery would never be solved. The case remained officially open, but active investigation had long since ended. Detective Martinez was preparing for retirement, planning to pass the file to a younger detective who would inherit the unsolved case along with dozens of others. The Chin family had found a way to live with uncertainty, though it never became easy. They marked their daughters' birthdays each year with quiet celebrations, imagining what Sarah and Emma might have become. Linda sometimes caught herself looking for them in crowds, her heart jumping at the sight of young women with dark hair and familiar gestures. The preserve had weathered the tragedy and continued its mission, but the memory of the lost twins remained woven into its history. New employees learned about the case as part of their safety training, understanding the importance of vigilance and preparation. The memorial plaque had become weathered over the years, but community volunteers maintained it carefully, ensuring that Sarah and Emma's names remained clearly visible. Mrs. Peterson had never stopped carrying the weight of that day. She'd become an expert in outdoor education safety, consulting with schools across the region on field trip protocols. Her presentations always included a slide showing two smiling 8-year-olds in purple backpacks, though she rarely spoke their names aloud. The guilt had evolved into purpose, driving her to prevent other families from experiencing similar loss. The old maintenance road had become completely overgrown, barely visible even to those who knew where to look. Nature had reclaimed the path where the twins had presumably vanished, covering their tracks with 18 years of growth. Occasionally, hikers would stumble upon the blocked entrance and wonder about its significance, but most passed by without giving it a second thought. Local newspapers still ran anniversary stories each October, updating readers on the case and appealing for any new information. The articles had become shorter over the years, relegated to inside pages as other news took precedence. But the Chin family appreciated these reminders that their daughters hadn't been forgotten, even as hope for resolution had faded. The case had influenced law enforcement protocols throughout the region. Missing children cases now received immediate, intensive response, with multiple agencies coordinating from the first hours. The Chin twins' disappearance had taught investigators that time was critical, that waiting for children to find their own way home could mean losing them forever. As autumn 2007 arrived, Mrs. Peterson was preparing for another school year at Lincoln Elementary. She'd been teaching 5th grade for several years now, finding that older students required different skills but brought their own rewards. Her reputation as an exceptional educator had grown, and she was frequently asked to mentor new teachers. The building itself was old, constructed in the 1960s and showing its age despite regular maintenance. Mrs. Peterson had been assigned a classroom on the 2nd floor, room 237, which had served various purposes over the decades. Previous teachers had left their marks in subtle ways: motivational posters layered over older decorations, supply cabinets organized according to different systems, in the accumulated detritus of educational careers. As she worked to prepare her classroom for the new year, Mrs. Peterson found herself thinking about the Chin twins more than usual. Perhaps it was the approaching anniversary, or maybe the sight of new fifth graders who would have been Sarah and Emma's age. She learned to manage these waves of memory, using them as motivation to be the best teacher possible for the students in her care. The custodial staff had deep cleaned the room over the summer, moving furniture and scrubbing areas that normally remained untouched. Mrs. Peterson appreciated their thoroughness, though it meant she had to reorganize everything according to her preferences. She developed specific systems over the years, arrangements that maximized both learning and safety. While moving a heavy bookshelf away from the wall to create a reading corner, Mrs. Peterson noticed something unusual. The baseboard behind the shelf had a small gap, as if a section had been removed and replaced. Curious, she examined it more closely, running her fingers along the edge. The piece was loose, held in place by friction rather than nails or screws. Gently working the baseboard section free, Mrs. Peterson discovered a small cavity behind it, clearly intentionally created. Her heart began to race as she reached inside, her fingers encountering something that didn't belong in a wall space. She pulled out a small plastic bag, sealed and containing what appeared to be personal items. With trembling hands, Mrs. Peterson opened the bag. Inside were two small notebooks, the kind elementary students used for assignments. The covers were decorated with stickers and childish drawings. One had Sarah, written in careful block letters, the other, Emma, in more flowing script. Below the names, both notebooks bore the same date, October 12, 1989. Mrs. Peterson's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, clutching the notebooks to her chest. After 18 years of wondering, of guilt, and sleepless nights, she was holding evidence that the Chin twins had been in this very room on the day they disappeared. But how was that possible? They'd vanished from the nature preserve, miles away from Lincoln Elementary. With shaking hands, she opened Sarah's notebook first. The pages contained what appeared to be a journal, written in the neat handwriting of an 8-year-old girl. The entries were dated, starting several weeks before the field trip and continuing right up to October 12th. September 20th, 1989. Emma and I found the secret place today. Mrs. Peterson showed us the old classroom when she was substitute teaching here last month. She said it used to be a storage room, but they made it into a classroom. There's a loose board behind the bookshelf. We can hide things there, and no one will ever find them. Mrs. Peterson's blood turned cold. She remembered that day, substituting at Lincoln Elementary while still working primarily at Millbrook. She'd been giving a tour to some visiting students, including the Chin twins who'd come with their mother for a school board meeting. It had been innocent, just showing them around the older building, but somehow it had led to this. She continued reading, each entry revealing more of the twins' secret activities. They'd been coming to Lincoln Elementary after school, finding ways into the building to access their hiding place. They'd been documenting their adventures, treating it like a grand game of exploration. Emma's notebook told a similar story, but with more emotional detail about their secret adventures. Her writing revealed a child's excitement about having a special place that belonged only to her and her sister. The entries described elaborate plans for their hiding spot, dreams of creating a secret club, and the thrill of having something that was entirely their own. The final entries, dated October 12, 1989, made Mrs. Peterson's heart stop completely. Sarah's entry, "Today is the field trip to the nature place. Emma and I are so excited. But we have a secret plan. After the trip, we're going to come here to our special place and write about everything we saw. We told Mom we're going to Jessica's house after school, but really we're coming here. We want to put our nature samples in our secret place." Emma's entry, "I can't wait for today. The field trip is going to be amazing, and then Sarah and I will come to our secret room and make it even more special. We're going to bring back leaves and rocks and maybe some pictures. Our secret place will be like a museum that only we know about." Mrs. Peterson's hands were shaking so violently she could barely turn the pages. The implications were staggering. The twins hadn't vanished in the nature preserve at all. Somehow, they'd left the field trip and made their way to Lincoln Elementary, to this very room where she now sat. But that was impossible. She'd been with them at the preserve. She'd seen them disappear on the old maintenance road. Or had she? 18 years of guilt and memory had created a narrative, but what if that narrative was wrong? She forced herself to think back to that day, to really examine her memories rather than the story she'd told herself for nearly 2 decades. The fork in the trail. The moment when she'd realized the twins were missing. Had she actually seen them take the right path, or had she simply assumed that's what happened when they weren't with the group? The truth began to crystallize with horrible clarity. The twins had never taken the old maintenance road. They'd somehow slipped away from the group entirely, probably during one of the stops when children were scattered around looking at plants or animals. While everyone assumed they'd gotten lost in the woods, Sarah and Emma had been executing their secret plan to visit their hiding place at Lincoln Elementary. But if they'd made it to the school, where were they now? Mrs. Peterson's relief at solving part of the mystery was immediately replaced by a new horror. The notebooks were 18 years old, hidden in this wall since the day the twins disappeared. What had happened to them after they'd written these final entries? She continued reading, hoping for more clues. The notebooks contained detailed descriptions of their secret activities over several weeks. They'd been remarkably resourceful, finding ways into the building through a basement window that didn't latch properly. They'd explored empty classrooms, played elaborate games of hide and seek, and created an entire fantasy world around their secret hideout. The writing revealed typical 8-year-old concerns and excitement, but also a level of planning that was impressive for children their age. They brought supplies to their hiding place: snacks, small toys, art materials, and notebooks for documenting their adventures. They'd even created a schedule for their visits, carefully avoiding times when the building would be occupied. Mrs. Peterson realized she needed to call the police immediately. This evidence would reopen the case entirely, shifting the investigation from a wilderness search to something much closer to home. But first, she needed to understand what she was looking at, to piece together as much as possible before investigators took over. She examined the plastic bag more carefully, looking for any other clues. There were indeed some nature samples, pressed leaves, small rocks, and what appeared to be photographs. The photos were old Polaroids, somewhat faded but still clear enough to make out details. The images showed the twins in various locations around Lincoln Elementary. They were smiling and posing, clearly enjoying their secret adventure. Some photos showed them in this very classroom, sitting at desks and pretending to be students. Others captured them in hallways, the library, and even what appeared to be the principal's office. One photograph made Mrs. Peterson's heart race. It showed both girls standing next to a man she didn't recognize, someone in work clothes who appeared to be a custodian or maintenance worker. The man's face was partially obscured by shadow, but his presence in the photo suggested the twins hadn't been alone in the building during their secret visits. The implications were terrifying. If someone else had known about the twins' activities, someone with access to the building, then their disappearance might not have been an accident at all. Mrs. Peterson's mind raced through possibilities, each more frightening than the last. She needed to examine the photograph more closely, but the lighting in the classroom wasn't adequate. Carefully gathering all the evidence, she moved to a window where natural light would provide better illumination. The man in the photo was middle-aged, wearing a gray uniformed shirt. His posture suggested familiarity with the twins, not the wariness of someone who'd just discovered children where they shouldn't be. Mrs. Peterson tried to remember who had worked at Lincoln Elementary in 1989. She'd only been a substitute then, not familiar with all the staff members. But someone would remember. Someone would know who this man was and whether he'd still been working at the school when the twins disappeared. The photograph was dated on the back in Emma's handwriting, October 10th, 1989, 2 days before the field trip, 2 days before they vanished. The timing suggested this hadn't been a chance encounter, but rather part of an established relationship between the twins and this unknown man. Mrs. Peterson's teacher training kicked in, overriding her emotional response with practical action. She needed to preserve this evidence, document everything carefully, and contact authorities immediately. But she also needed to prepare for what this discovery might mean for everyone involved. The case that had haunted her for 18 years was about to be blown wide open. The twins hadn't died lost in the wilderness as everyone had assumed. They'd made it to their secret hiding place, just as they'd planned. But something had gone wrong after that, something involving a man whose identity was hidden in the shadows of an old photograph. As Mrs. Peterson reached for her phone to call Detective Martinez, she realized that the mystery of Sarah and Emma Chin was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The discovery in room 237 would change everything, not just for the investigation, but for everyone who'd been living with the assumption that the twins had simply vanished into the woods. The truth, as it often does, was much more complicated and infinitely more disturbing than anyone had imagined. After 18 years of searching the wrong place for the wrong reasons, the real story of what happened to Sarah and Emma Chin was finally about to be revealed. And Mrs. Peterson, The teacher who'd carried the guilt of their disappearance for nearly 2 decades would be the one to unlock the secret that had been hidden in the walls of Lincoln Elementary all along.